nobody you don't know is going to be impressed. And so the day-to-day gets really, really difficult because you're flipping on social media and you see that guy you know that you think you're better than getting all those likes. And then your brain starts going in all these insane directions. They must be successful. What am I missing? Why aren't people paying attention to me? Meanwhile, you're doing the work that matters, and they're going to have to constantly reinvent themselves every time there's an algorithm change.
You're an inspiration to our entire organization.
Welcome to the Gym Marketing Made Simple podcast. We're going to be talking the done-for-you marketing and sales strategies proven to work with boutique fitness gyms to increase quality lead flow and grow your revenue. Don't try to be a professional marketer and waste tons of money. Let the experts at Lasso do it for you. And now, here are your hosts, Blake Ruff and Sherman Merricks.
All right, guys, here we go. Another episode of Gym Marketing Made Simple. I'm Sherman. Today I have a special guest all the way from Canada, Jonathan Goodman. Guys, if you've never heard of him, a great author, wrote this amazing book. I'm telling everyone right now, when we name the book, get on Amazon, order it. The Obvious Choice. Timeless lessons on success, profit, and finding your way. But first of all, Jonathan, thanks for hanging out with us, buddy.
What's up, man? Happy Good Friday.
Happy Good Friday.
Break the fourth wall. We're recording this on Good Friday, buddy.
So someone that, someone that's never heard of you and they read your book, they're going to have tons of questions. So sure. I sort of want to start off with what sort of is the obvious choice, if you can sort of break it down for us?
Real simply, there's this pressure these days to become a pretty good choice to a whole bunch of people who don't have any reason to choose you specifically. And I feel like that's at the core of a lot of the frustration of a lot of the people who work in our industry, who are working really, really hard and yet not getting the results commensurate to the amount of effort that they're putting in. They're doing tons of content. They're doing all the networking things. They're educating and doing all the courses. They're even hiring all the mentors, right? And they're almost like pushing up against this invisible ceiling that they can't seem to jump over. The crux of the obvious choice is it's much better to be the obvious choice to a select few people than a pretty good choice to a whole bunch of people. Because nobody hires a good choice.
Yeah.
People hire the obvious choice. And you don't actually need that many customers. I mean, gym needs 100, 200, maybe 300 members. Who gives a shit if you have 5,000 people following your social media account? It's completely and utterly irrelevant for the goals that most people have. I talk about it like this. There's two games that we get to choose to play today. You can play the try to win the internet game, and then you can play the I'm going to build a business game. And both games are perfectly fine, but they have different time horizons, rules of engagement, odds of success, and reward mechanisms. And so if you're playing the try to win the internet game, you're trying to become famous on the internet. That is a fundamentally different game with different rules and different instructions and different reward mechanisms than, I just got to get some members for my gym.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. I believe that, you said something when you talked about, the obvious choice. I think that's something that I really, really can get behind, because so many times, regardless of what your business is, so many people, like you said, they're playing that game of, I just want to be, something to everyone, I can have, like in our case, like I'll use Lasso as an example, okay, if we're going to help all gym owners across all all the board, from doing $1,000 a month revenue to $100,000 a month revenue, we're really not going to help anyone.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I believe that you guys that are listening to this, you really need to obviously read the book and sort of niche down on who you really want to help. and sort of go to work from there, because I strongly believe that's a game changer, that when people get behind it, it's a clear choice. I think there's a saying, there's riches in the niches, right?
Yeah.
But like, it is hard to do though, especially when you're first starting out, right? Like, you're just thinking like, I can't like niche down and only target certain people, because I'm going to be excluding so many people, and how am I going to grow my business? Like, what would you say to someone like that?
Well, so what I love about this conversation is there's so many nuances to it, which you spoke about choosing your customer. I think is something that's underappreciated. How do you possibly build a productized, scaled service offering if you don't have a very specific customer that you operate with? We've got a coaching mentorship company for online fitness, and it's the same type of thing. We're very selective it's the craziest, stupidest thing ever from like an advertising perspective, because we're spending, whatever ungodly amount of money we're spending on meta ads at any given time. And yet we turn away 95% of people who apply to us, which is insane. But you can't build a productized, scaled service unless you're very specific in who you work with and who you don't. Let me give you an example. It's very tactical on this, of way back when, in my days of personal training. I worked in a small boutique gym in Toronto in a area called Avenue in Eglinton, like one of the richest kind of postal codes in Canada. So it was a good place to personal train at, right? But I started writing a blog. This is back in 2010. So I started writing a blog, and I had blog posts that went viral back then, like really viral, to the point where, and I was, a trainer in a small town gym. I didn't know anybody. I was answering questions that my clients had. Will fruit make me fat, for example, was one of the articles that went viral. Yeah. That's still a question that people debate on the internet 15 years later, which is insane to me. But I started, and so, these articles went viral, and I started getting attention, and I became a contributor to Arnold Schwarzenegger's blog, and Livestrong called me one of the 24 best personal trainers you've never heard of. And so I was ranking in like best personal trainer, right? And you know how many people came into the gym as a result of my articles going viral and asking to train with me?
Very, very few, if any, I imagine.
Not one ever.
Yeah.
Not one ever. Ever. Okay? You know what I also did on that blog? I gave an award to my clients each month. I called it the half badge, which was the hardest fuck badge. And I gave it to whichever one of my clients was the hardest as fuckest. And it was the worst. Like, it was literally an image that I found on Google Images that I went in Microsoft Paint. That's how long ago this was. And I used my cursor, I kid you not, and I drew an HAF on this like shield, right? Yeah. And I printed an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper with the shield. And every month I'd award it to one of my clients. And then I wrote up on my blog an article. So we took a picture together, right? And then I wrote up on my blog an article about why they were so hardcore, why they were so great that month. Yep. That built my clientele. They're both content.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But how do you use the same content, the same efforts, or even less efforts to fulfill your short-term needs? I think that's the conversation that we need to be having. I look at social media as a savings account. It's something that you invest into, and building a following, right? If you're using it for that way, it's something that you invest into with excess time and capital, and you hope that it kicks off interest in the interim, but you don't depend on your savings account to buy groceries that week.
I hope not.
It's the same thing. It's the same way.
Yeah. So, I like that, because even one of the stories that you gave in the book, not stories, one of the examples you gave in the book, when you were talking about, you went to the health club and you were talking to the trainers, and
that was
one of the girls, she kept talking about, well, how do I grow my following? She wasn't worried about, she wasn't worried about the 20,000 people right outside of those doors. She was like,
crazy.
Like, how do I grow this following? And I believe that in 2025, the day and age, especially new trainers, I know there's some old ones too, they're thinking, if I can just go viral, if I can just have 50,000 followers, that will change my life. And I just don't believe that's true.
There was another story that got left out of the book, but it was originally written into it. I was called in for all of the, oh God, what do they call them? In Canada, I don't know if you're super familiar, but in Canada, basically the entire country is like monopolized by Good Life Fitness.
Yeah.
And so Good Life Fitness personal trainers are like 80% of personal trainers in Canada. Like it's insane how much of a monopoly they have across the whole country, but really in Canada, I mean, you've got like Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal, you know, in terms of major towns. And anyway, so I was called in. I'm good friends with the guy who heads up all the personal training for Good Life, and he called me in to speak to all of their district managers. So basically, these 14 people were the heads of like 80% of all the personal trainers in Canada.
Yeah.
And he brought me in to speak to them about brand, about content, about stuff. And the other story that I left out was the conversation with them, because their job was to get all of their trainers busy in their clubs. And even them, they were confused as anybody else. They were like, well, how do we get our clubs to build our social media build our followings on social media for our clubs so that we can fill our trainers? I was like, who gives a shit, man?
Yeah.
How are you getting out in your community?
Yeah.
Nobody's going to travel more than 20 minutes to go to a personal trainer. You're talking about a 3-mile radius of your gym. Like, let's talk about that. Let's talk about how to celebrate the other businesses nearby. Let's talk about how to celebrate the mavens, using the Malcolm Gladwell tipping point. You know, who are the business leaders? Who are the well-connected people in your neighborhood? How can you growth hack your way into the center of that community? I'm doing this with authors right now.
Wow.
I'm going to New York next week for one day, and I'm hosting a lunch and a dinner with authors in New York. It'd be about 15 of them, and then I'm flying home the next morning. Right? You don't see that on social media, but what I'm doing behind the scenes is I'm saying I want to build a career in authorship.
Yep.
Who's already there? What value can I provide them? I can connect them to one another. I don't even need to know them. Everybody wants to be connected.
Correct.
Few people want to go to the effort of doing the connecting. There's value that you can provide there. It's a crazy world once you get one step beyond the superficial. I need people to notice me with my trendy music pointing at words in space. And you realize just how low the bar is to actually make an impact behind the scenes. But nobody you don't know is going to be impressed.
Yeah.
And so the day-to-day gets really, really difficult because you're flipping on social media and you see that guy you know that you think you're better than getting all those likes. And then your brain starts going in all these insane directions. They must be successful. What am I missing? Why aren't people paying attention to me? Meanwhile, you're doing the work that matters, and they're going to have to constantly reinvent themselves every time there's an algorithm change. It's an insane world.
No, that's good. Me having been a gym owner for 13 years, I saw this.
Where'd you own your gym?
In Florida.
Florida. Okay.
I'm in Florida.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
So
Cool.
I had a gym. I'm in a decent sized town. I'm in Gainesville, Florida. So
Yeah. Okay.
college town. So I remember throughout the years, there would be times where gyms in town, like I would see them on social media, especially when I was young in the game. I would see them on social media. It looked as if they were absolutely crushing it. I'm just like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, one day I want to be like that, this and that. And then what would happen? 4 or 5 years down the road,
Yeah.
there's a "we are closing"
That's
going
right.
on their door, and I'm just like, what?
That's right.
But I just saw your classes were
But
full.
you were doing so well.
Correct.
You were doing so
Correct.
well. I mean, you got some gray in your beard. If I grew mine out, you'd see a whole bunch of gray in my beard. We've been around the horn a few years, you know, Sherman. Like, that's what happens when you've been around. I mean, I've been a guy in the internet fitness world since 2011. That world, I liken it to dog years. I'm basically 90 years old. Like, I'm a great grandfather. Like,
Yeah.
I've actually mentored people who mentor people who have mentored people who are now beginning to open up mentorship businesses. I've seen just so many revolutions because this shit turns over every 2 or 3 years.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Correct.
I've seen so many revolutions of it, and the patterns are very clear. If you fly too close to the sun like Icarus, you might hit it one time, but then you're going to get burnt. And you might be able to get up and fly again and again and again, but there's only so many times you can do that, which is why I'm sure you see those people. Actually, here's a question for you.
Okay.
I'm sure you're thinking of one person right now. Like, you don't need to say their name. Call him Steve. I'm sure you're thinking of Steve, but who got all this attention at one point, and now you're like, I wonder who Steve is. I'm willing to bet you that Steve is actively involved in one of these three industries: cannabis, crypto, or AI. And the reason for that is there's a certain type of personality, and it's not a bad thing, but they're very good at being opportunists. Whatever is in vogue, they jump on, so they were a life coach, maybe an online fitness coach in that heyday. Then they did FX, Forex trading. Then they were into the NFT thing. Then they're of course in meme coins, of course, right?
Yep.
And they did some Airbnb stuff a little bit, when that was hot. They did cannabis when it started to get legalized across all the states. And now they're actively into AI, and it's like, wow, bro, you're like good at that this week. That's incredible. But like the Venn diagram is a single dot. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. But you have to be around for long enough to be able to recognize it. And I don't knock them at all. Could be actually a way to keep things new and exciting. For me personally, I've got a 7-year-old, I've got a 3-year-old, I've got another kid coming in 3 weeks.
Oh man,
another kid coming imminently, maybe tomorrow. You know what I'm saying? Like my wife is like, I think it's coming early. I was like, let's do this thing. I'll book this podcast with Sherman tomorrow then. But like, I just don't have the energy to keep switching. And I also have recognized just the absurd amount of compounding that exists when you stay in one place for a long period of time. Mastery and reputation is highly contextual. You could be a sought-after professor in one university and then go to another college because your family moves and you're having to build up a reputation again.
Correct.
I noticed this with the Obvious Choice book. I could have written another book about online fitness. Sold 25,000 copies the first week. But instead, I wrote a book for anybody who's a small business leader, small business service business leader. And as a result, I was trying to make a name for myself, and still am, in worlds where I have not been in for 15 years. I couldn't even get like a 19-year-old ghostwriter Twitter expert to answer my email. Yeah. Some guy who's bragging about how he made $80,000 last year working from home. And I was like, I mean, that's fine. But like, and so you have to recognize when you change, you start over. There might be a bit of a tailwind, but you start over, and it's not a bad thing. But it's a real thing.
Yeah. No, I like that. No. I like that. I've totally, obviously we work with hundreds of clients here in, like in the marketing space, and I can speak to that, right? Like they will, plenty of people, they'll come to us and they have, like we'll ask them a basic question.
Right.
Who's your ideal client?
Yeah.
Oh, well, my ideal client could be, Jim, Susie, Rachel, between the ages of 13 and 68.
Yeah.
We can help all of those people. I'm just like, I understand you can help them all.
I help new moms and busy professional dads
Correct.
have more confidence and be more fit so that they can be active with the people that they love. It's like, you just said a whole bunch of words that don't mean anything to anybody, man.
Man, I agree. Like we always talk about this. My partner says this a lot. We're talking to people like, think about this. If you're online and it's attention dog owners, well, if you have a dog, you probably look at it. Oh, I got a dog. He made, well, that's cool.
Yeah.
But like in my instance, I have a Rottweiler. So, but if it
Mm.
says attention Rottweiler owners, well, now you're specifically talking to me.
Yeah.
So I need to dive in a little bit deeper. So,
Right.
my question to you is, for new coaches, new business owners, what's one or two of the biggest mistakes you see with like sort of green newer people in the space, right? Like, what are a couple of those mistakes that you see them making, just coming out of the gate, ready to take on the world,
Right.
until the world slaps them?
Well, number one, not admitting your ignorance. I mean, if you're familiar with the Dunning-Kruger curve of cognitive dissonance, right? There's a period where we know a little bit, especially in a profession like the fitness industry, where it's very much a mastery profession. You can learn enough to build a decent workout in a weekend. But then it takes a lifetime to master it. And so that's ripe for cognitive dissonance, where you know a little bit about a thing and then you become overconfident in your knowledge because you don't yet know what you don't know. And so your confidence goes way up. And the Dunning-Kruger curve, it's called the tip of Mount Stupid. And it's just kind of like a funny curve, but
Yeah.
I don't know, it's memorable. And then as you learn more and you work more in your industry, you actually dip down into what's called the valley of despair, where you then become so beaten down by what you know that you don't know that you almost become paralyzed to move and to say anything. And you get stuck in that for a long time. And I've spoken to a whole bunch of leaders in our field about that. One of the guys you might be familiar with is Brett Contreras. He goes by the Blue Guy. So
Yep.
Brett, like me, was blogging back in 2010, right? And we've gotten to know each other over the years. He was actually blogging a bit before me. He's one of the few guys who was before me. And he had a period where he actually stopped producing content. And the reason for that was, I mean, he looks back at it now. I'm putting words in his mouth, but we did have this conversation, was that he knew that there was nuance to everything. And he knew that the only way to get content to really fly was to simplify and chop off the beginning and the end and make a quick hit, divisive, very powerful statement. And he did not yet have the ability or the knowledge or the skill or the experience to be able to do that, to be able to simplify. And he was paralyzed from creating content. Well, now, of course, he can do it, and he's one of the best out there at content creation. Yeah. But that happens, right? And then as you become a master in the field, right, you start coming out of the valley of despair and you start being able to say things again simply, or you just understand, what you know and what you don't know so clearly that you talk about the things you know when you don't talk about the things that you don't know. So number one is just kind of recognizing where you're at then and what you don't know, and that's fine. But building up your education appropriately. So in the Obvious Choice book, one of my favorite sections is actually the optimistic ignorance chapter, where I walk people through this process of what I call leapfrog skills and leapfrog learning. Appreciating that in any industry, in the fitness industry is prime for this. There's actually a period of diminishing returns relatively early on for most people who work in it in terms of industry specific knowledge. Like, the honest truth is that most people who work in fitness can build a good enough workout for the vast majority of clients. Is the workout in your gym going to be that much better than anybody else? Even if it is, will anybody that you train notice or care?
Correct.
The answer is in almost every case, no. If you're training high performers and people on podiums and stuff, then maybe. But most people do a combination. I trained, top actors and singers and got kids ready for the NHL Combine, Olympians, but like the majority of my clients was 67-year-old Kathy, wanting to be able to pick stuff up off the ground. And so if I give her a goblet squat for 8 reps at a 3010 tempo with a 75-second rest in between sets at an 8 RPE versus maybe 10 reps at an 8 RPE with a 2111 tempo. Is that going to make any goddamn difference to Kathy? No, of course not.
Nice.
And so what I teach in the book is, year one, you kind of want to be all in on like industry specific knowledge. You just don't know enough yet.
Correct.
Year two, you're going to be probably about 75% industry specific knowledge, about 25% leapfrog skills. And I'll explain what those are in a second. And then every year that follows, you're going to be somewhere around 25% industry specific knowledge for your continuing education and 75% leapfrog skills. And the reason for that is success-wise, the rate of diminishing returns is very low for industry-specific knowledge. What is valuable is being able to combine your industry-specific skills with other complementary skills that are going to compound their impacts. Do you understand motivational interviewing, behavioral psychology, wealth management? Do you know how money works? How's your communication sales skills? All right. And so you actually have to go out and gather all of these complementary skill sets. That's the advice that I give to any new trainer is get out of your head, get out of your world, get out of your bubble, learn the things that the people obsessed with your thing aren't learning, because that's the only way that you're going to leapfrog them in terms of your success.
No, that's good. That's good. So I'm going to ask you, sort of a couple personal questions here, because I wanted to know,
okay,
what you sort of thought about this. Now, what was sort of the major turning point in your career that sort of changed everything, right? Like it could be anything. Like, just what do you think? Like, man, when this started happening, things just started changing for me.
Yeah. I'll give you two.
Okay.
I'll give you two.
Okay.
The first was very early on when I was on the gym floor and I knew that I was missing something. Like, I was doing well, with clients, but I felt like I was missing something. And so what I started to do was I built this process of documenting what I was doing during the day and then analyzing and trying to improve at night. So I had a paper clipboard, and on the back of it, I kept a blank piece of paper. And every time that I did anything with a client or I was on the floor or something happened in the gym, I just wrote a point form of what happened during the day, right? It might be client asked me about renewing, okay? It might be have a crush on the secretary, which happened like more than once. It might be, they always hire these like cute little Jewish secretaries. And then it might be like another trainer was instructing, I remember this specifically, another trainer was instructing sumo squats wrong. They were having their client do sumo squats with their hands outside of their knees, and the clients couldn't get it. And I was like, do I intervene?
Yeah.
Right? What do you do as another trainer on the floor when a trainer that you're working with might be hurting their client, right? Do you step in? And so all of these things, right? Sales, training, like pick up garbage on the ground. And then what I do is at night, I would look at this bullet point and I'd write up and I'd think, how could I have better dealt with this? What could I have said? What systems could I set up to be able to do this? And I had a bit of a network of trainers. And so what I might do is I might Google the thing, or I might call up another trainer. I'd be like, yo, this happened. What would you do? And I started writing that down and documenting it. That was one of the major ways that I put rocket fuel into my abilities on the floor, all of the little nuanced bits, that reflection. And then that document turned into my first book called Ignite the Fire. That book, Ignite the Fire, I self-published when I was 24 years old in 2011. Book sold 80, 90,000 copies now. And really launched my career outside of personal training as an educator. That book was effectively that document that I worked with an editor to turn into a book. After a year or so. So that's number one.
Okay.
is a process to document and reflect and improve upon all of the little nuanced bits that you go about in any given day. When you have the time, particularly when you're young,
Yeah.
it's worth
Correct.
doing. Number one. Number two was, again, has to do with Ignite the Fire with this book. But I came out with a first version, and the book did okay. And then I came out with a revised version a couple years later. And I really only made, a couple logical inconsistencies and whatever I fixed, but I really only made one major change, which is any time that I had a point or made a statement or had a piece of advice in the book, I recognized humbly that I was probably not the first person to ever think that. And so I started searching for other people in my industry who had made a similar point. And I took out what I said, and I quoted them, and I included them in the book. So I basically added in over 80 different professionals, quoted and attributed them into my book. You don't need permission. I mean, I'm quoting them, right? I'm giving them full credit for. Some of these people I knew, many of them I didn't. When it came time then to promote the next book, well, what do you think I did? I sent every single one of them a copy of the book with their section highlighted with a Post-it note going down into that page. Well, every single one of them now is showing off, not everyone, most of them, are showing off that they're involved in this thing. Said another way, they're referring it. They're extending their trust to my product, to their audience, social media, email, even within their communities. They were proud to be involved. If I were to say one thing that I did in my career online that helped me break past that kind of invisible line that I talked about early in our conversation, it was that. It was figuring out a way to include as many other exceptional people in my work as I possibly could, and putting their name on it and giving them full credit. And then not asking them to promote it necessarily, but instead just thanking them for the great work that they're doing, recognizing them, catching them in the act of doing something good, instead of saying, hey man, instead of like shitting other people on the internet, which is what you see all the time. You do these React videos and just be like, got you. You did something good. I saw it. Good job, man. That was the biggest tipping point. And then it's just been full on from there.
I like that. I actually love that. I love that because, business owners in general, many of us, we think like, well, we want to make sure that we are okay, right? We want to make sure we're okay. So like you're saying, yes, I said this, this is my quote, but you sort of flipped it on his head. Now,
what's that?
I
hear what you're saying.
I'm not the first person to have said this. I'm going to find someone that said something similar, give them credit. Like you're saying now, they're in a book, of course. People like to talk about themselves. So they're in a book. Hey, look at this dude. He quoted me. I don't even know this guy really. He quoted me.
But he noticed me.
Correct. But you take it to a whole nother level with that. Like, I love that.
Nothing new about this, right? A rising tide lifts all boats. But here's the analogy for you. This comes from a friend and mentor of mine. His name's Don Dapani. He's a Hindu priest. He's been a good friend for years, teaches entrepreneurs. He gives this analogy of, you picture a Kleenex, just a single Kleenex sheet.
Yep.
And, you're in the middle of the Kleenex, and then all the people around you are on the edges of the Kleenex. Well, what happens when you pinch the middle of that Kleenex and you start lifting it up? What do you notice? Everybody else around the sides of that Kleenex start rising up as well. That's the thing. That's the misconception. When you lift others up, you get lifted up higher. Even if they pass you, which happens. There have absolutely been people that have been in my business coaching programs that have gone on to build much bigger audiences and followings and whatever than me. Wonderful. Hell yeah. Right? When you lift others up, it brings you up as well. That's what we forget these days, I think. That's what we need to reconnect with.
That's great. That's great. We're going to end it there. So, all right. So I'm going to give you we'll give you a few seconds. Someone that wants to get in contact with you or know more about your work, how do they, how do they reach out to you? How do they, social media, all of that stuff? Because I want to make sure people can find you because I know people are going to be looking. I know they are.
Putting more of a push on YouTube right now.
Okay.
So YouTube, I think it's Jonathan Goodman Coach. But if you search my name, Jonathan Goodman, you should find my YouTube stuff. Subscribe there. I've got a newsletter I send out to, I don't know, 70,000, 80,000 or something. Each week I send articles there almost every week too. So that's 5repsfriday.com. And then buy the book. Buy the Obvious Choice book. It's the newest one, Ignite the Fire If You Work in Fitness. That's the book that still, gym owners are always buying copies for all their coaches and stuff.
Yep.
Yeah,
no, that's good.
Those are the top spots.
All right, perfect. No, that's good. So last personal question.
That was the worst pitch I think I've ever given.
Well, you just talked about that on
God.
X the other day. You're like, I've done a horrible job of talking about the book, and then someone gave like 9 lessons from the book. I was like, that's pretty good.
I've done such a bad job talking about the book. I know it's embarrassing, but that's a thing when you're so obsessed with your work. Like I'm so obsessed with authorship and crafting books that it's almost like the act of marketing the thing becomes a nuisance, and I need to get over that. That's my own crap. The next book, the manuscript is due in 2 weeks. Like it's done. It's coming out next January, and it's the same thing. I just have no energy right now to build a marketing plan for it. I'm like, I'm gonna take a month off, and then I'm gonna get my head out of my butt.
I got it. Okay, so now I know that you have wife, 2 little boys with another baby. Oh, so are you having a boy or a girl?
I don't know.
I don't know. So that's the way my wife and I did it. We did it the same way. We had 3 kids. We didn't find out the sex, and there's not many surprises left in the world, and that's one that we can have. So I love it. So all right. So I'm calling right now. I'm calling another boy. You've already created 2. You already created 2. It's going to be a third. You're going to have a little team, man. You can have another boy. But
you ever see the Kevin Hart and the Rock interviews? They're always funny. But you ever see the one where Kevin Hart just looks at the Rock, because I guess the Rock has a bunch of daughters. He's like. You got all that muscle. You can't even make a boy.
I have seen that. Those guys are hilarious. Okay, so
what are we talking about?
No. It's the last question. You love to travel.
Yes, sir.
Give me a. So I love to travel too. Give me a couple of your favorite places.
We spent the last 6 winters in Sayulita, Mexico. I love that little pueblo. With family, it's wonderful. Okay. I've lived there over 2 years of my life now, if you put it all together.
Okay.
Absolutely love it. Romantic with Allison, with my wife. Yeah, North Shore, Kauai, like paradise. We spent 2 seasons on Koh Phangan in Thailand many years ago that were magical, like 9 months total or so. But with a family, Sayulita, Mexico is pretty special. We're doing something next year, actually. You might be interested in. How old are your kids?
I have a 16, 13, 11-year-old.
A little bit older. Yeah, might not. We're joining up with this program called Boundless next year, where we're doing a couple semesters with them. So they basically mobilize in different towns throughout the world. I think they're in 5 different towns, but they've got a school and they've got co-working for the parents, and there's 20 to 30 families at once. So you've got kind of a built-in community. So we're doing 3 months in Senor, Indonesia, so in Bali, and then 3 months on Syros in Greece, one of the islands in Greece, with them next year, basically January to June. My kids will be in school in there, and we'll be in those places. So that'll be interesting, because that'll be like school built in at the same time, which would be cool. But your 16-year-old particularly, 13 to be fine. Your 16-year-old particularly might be a bit old for that.
Yeah. Well, we homeschool our kids, so we're used to educating them ourselves. But no, I like that. Okay, but I'm gonna look up Sayulita, Mexico. I'm gonna look that up.
Yeah, check it out and hit me up, and I'd be happy to kind of give you the lay of the land. We won't be there next year, but like I said, it's my second home.
Okay, all right,
happy to give you the lay of the land.
All right, perfect. Well, thanks for hanging out with us today, man. We appreciate it. And guys, as always, tell a friend to tune in, and we will chat with you guys next week.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Gym Marketing Made Simple podcast with Blake Ruff and Sherman Merricks. We hope you enjoy. We believe marketing should increase revenue and not waste money. So book your free call today. Head on over to lassoframework.com. That's LASSOFRAMEWORK.com and find the right words, get more customers, and increase your revenue. We'll see you here next time.